So if you want to introduce yourself, preface the conversation, say who you are, what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Great. Thank you, Cody. So, my name is Carly Pepin, and I'm a human behavior specialist. And individuals come to me when they're looking to overcome challenges that are keeping them stuck. And what I love to focus on is the perceptual content of what's going on within their mindset, what's going on the inside. Because I know that when I shift them on the inside and I help them to transform whatever they're having a really hard time with, they naturally can move forward in life without me. They just take action into their highest values, their highest purpose and priorities, which is quite inspiring because it gives me the opportunity to connect and work with individuals who are really desiring to move
Mhm.
outside this norm of living a life day to day by the duties and the shoulds and the have tos. And I tend to attract a lot of people who are really wanting to create a life that they love, wake up every day, do what they love what they do. And that's quite inspiring to connect with people who are willing to put in the energy, effort, and go through the challenges to make that happen.
Hmm. So just hearing you say this, I imagine there's a lot of talk with the people that you work with. There's probably a lot of talk about purpose. Finding your purpose or figuring out what your purpose is, maybe, or maybe pursuing your purpose. Am I right with that assumption, or am I kind of off a little
No,
bit?
absolutely. Yeah. And when we think about purpose, it's funny because people kind of label it as something that's nebulous and that has to be found. But we genuinely are purposeful human beings. In fact,
Hmm.
every day of our lives, you don't need to find your purpose. You're living by it, and it's actually evident in your life. You'll be spending the most time, energy, investing the most money in things that are most purposeful to you. It's when we put a label on it of what a purpose should look like or has to look like that we actually disconnect from the reality of what ours is. And it's different for every person on this planet. While some of us have similarities, they won't be exactly the same. For example, I know you love personal development, philosophy, all that stuff. And there's a similarity in that life purpose, but it's never going to be exactly the same. If two people were exactly the same on this planet, we'd cancel each other out. It's not necessary. We don't need two of the exact same people.
Exactly. Man, I love how you put that because, like, I feel like I've tried to make that point a couple times, but I couldn't clean it up as well as you just did. But it's like, I mean, that's true though, man, because there's no like, I think that people think about their purpose as this like grand thing, this like profound idea that comes to them or whatever. But it's like, I think the way what you're saying right now is it's like something that you can do that maybe somebody else can't do the exact same thing. You know what I mean? I was just talking to a guy yesterday, man, and we were talking about how like each person has their own unique contribution. Like like people can have a similar life to you, but nobody has like the exact life that you have down to the detail of your life. And so like if you're trying to do something that is unique to you that only you can do, I mean that's like that is your purpose here. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like I mean somebody yes, people can have like similar career paths or similar, goals or whatever it is. But like when it comes down to the details, man, of like who you are in your specific life, in the area that you're in, like it's only you that can do that. And I think that's amazing that we have that. I would call it an opportunity, like an opportunity to be who we are, who we can be.
Absolutely. And when we give ourselves that opportunity, we feel genuinely inspired and fulfilled, not in a happy, fluffy way. We don't wake up and everything is easy. We wake up and things are easy and things are still hard, but we're very
Hmm.
inspired to go through the challenges that we've created. And that's what, when I say create a life by design, is that you're not just designing your life around some fluffy bubble that's going to protect you from challenge. You're designing your life in a way that you're embracing challenges that inspire you, things that are so in line with your purpose that you go from, can I get over this, to I know I can. And you might in the beginning have some brain noise, but in the beginning you'll be like, here's a couple steps I know I can take. And then as you clear more of that brain noise and shift your perceptions around the challenge, you just get to the other side. And it's interesting too, because with our purpose, right? And you're right. Everyone, we all have similar jobs, same jobs. There's tons of human behavior specialists out in the world, coaches, consultants, but each one is going to be uniquely different. We're focused on providing and giving a service that we value the most as well. So
Hmm.
part of the service that I provide also aligns with my life purpose.
Right.
And this is the cool part too. Our life purpose doesn't just come around because everything's happy go lucky. It actually is built from your biggest pains, the biggest voids, because the thing that you want to fulfill the most, think about it, you're trying to fill your cup and you feel the most inspired by filling your cup with something that you love, is because there's a part of you that perceives it's lacking or missing. So the more that you have it in your life, the more fulfilled you feel. And why would you think it's lacking or missing if it's your life purpose, right? Well, that's because somewhere along the lines, and this could be all the way back to in utero, right? We can go all the way back to in utero childhood. There was some trauma that you perceived and experienced that drove you to have the value system that you have, to have the priorities you have, to have the purpose. So I love helping people create a life by design. I love helping them get out of a life of duty. I'm just going to share myself as an example because it's now transparent with the way that I've described it. The biggest challenge that I had growing up perceptually is perceiving that I couldn't do that, that I was living this life of duty. I perceived that every day I was waking up and not actually experiencing what I loved. If I look back now, the truth is a lot of that was a major perceptual challenge. Like I look back and see how dedicated and focused I have been to my life purpose and priorities, but because I had that perception, it massively disconnected me from it. And so it's interesting. I keep trying to fill that cup that's actually quite filled because I had the void and the perceived trauma around it. So we're quite fascinating individuals. I have a friend who his perceptual challenge was education and learning, and he couldn't learn to read, had trouble writing when he was growing up. And now he's one of the most well-studied individuals I've ever met so far on this planet. And why is that? Because the perceived pain around having a lack of knowledge is his actual inner drive to fulfill that as a life purpose. I remember another individual who perceived that they were disconnected, from the family. They're disconnected from their family. They had chaos in the family growing up. And what's most important to them? They focus and spend the most time and energy building their own family unit, building it in the way that inspires them. So every individual on this planet is not just fulfilling their purpose, but trying to actually overcome a void and a perceived trauma from the past. And part of the perceptual shift that I love to help people with is seeing the gift in the challenges that they receive, because part of those big traumas that you've gone through has actually given you the opportunity to be who you are today. And it's funny when you put together the pieces of the puzzle and people see it, they just open their heart. It opens their
Hmm.
heart. They get tears of gratitude, inspiration, and they realize that things weren't in the way of their life. Like they were actually on the way to helping them to become the person that they're inspired by today. Not the person that they're proud of or they're puffed up of, like just the person that inspires them, the life that inspires them, those parts. It's quite inspiring when people see that, get it, and glimpse a piece of the magnificence of their life.
Okay. This is a very like I love the mindset here. I love the way you're looking at this. This is a very profound thing. And I've heard this in different ways than what you're saying it right now, but I love the way that you're saying it about how these things that we consider traumatic can actually push us to where we're supposed to be. Um, I want to back up for a second. You were talking about happiness, and you were talking about just kind of being in this bubble, just kind of being in this I don't know, whatever happiness is. It's not really a constant state. I feel like happiness is kind of something that comes. I think when people say that they want to live a life of happiness, I think what they actually mean is they want to live a life of fulfillment. Like I think they want to be fulfilled. I think that's what most people are after when they say I want to be happy. Because if you think about what being happy is, it's almost like like children are happy. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like being happy is there's almost like a sort of innocence to it that you don't really know what's going on outside of that happiness bubble. But so I think a lot of people when they say they want to be happy, they want to be fulfilled. But you mentioned a good point, man, which was that you know if we're trying to do something that's challenging or if we're pursuing our purpose, if we're on a path, being happy is not going to cut it, man, because there's going to come along things that test you and test your patience and test how bad you really want this thing. And you have to be able to be consistent and persevere through those things. And happiness is not going to do that. Happiness is not going to, it's just like motivation. Like people say, I want to be motivated to do things. Okay, well, motivation might help you 20% of the time, if that. But you have to have something else that's pushing you, that keeps you going through these things. Because a lot of times when you're trying to do something, a goal, career, relationship, whatever, there's going to be times, maybe 50% of the time, it's going to be like a challenge until you get to a point where you can maintain, a place that you want to be. But it's like you have to have something else that's pushing you. And this desire to be happy, or this sort of innocence about happiness, this ignorance about happiness, is not going to, it's not going to push you forward in a consistent way. So what I always tell people when they say that is, I say that the sense of purpose is what's going to keep pushing you forward. I think Friedrich Nietzsche says, if you can remember the why, you can bear the how. If you know why you're doing something, if you know the meaning behind why you're doing this thing, that can push you through the hard times to keep you going. And it's not just about, oh, I want to be happy in this moment. It's about, no, okay, if I do this thing, if I keep going through this degree, 3 years, 4 years later, I'm going to have this thing. It's going to be worth it. So that was the first thing. The second thing you were talking about, we were talking about the trauma, and this is such a I love this concept because I've heard this concept from many different people. An example that comes to my head, and I'm not saying this is traumatic, because it's not, because there are things that are traumatic that deserve the label of traumatic. I'm not saying this is traumatic, but I'm saying the example that immediately comes to my head is, like, before I started a business, before I became an entrepreneur, it, it was like every job I had, and I had probably, I don't know, dude, I started my business when I was 20. And so, like, I had my first job at like 14ish, but like my first public job was probably like 16, 17. In that 3 or 4 year time frame, I had probably had like 30 plus jobs, man. And I had jobs that people around me, like when I was 18, 19, 20, I had like warehousing jobs, manufacturing jobs. These people that were in these places, like, to them, that was a good job. They were fulfilled. It was good money. It was whatever, the benefits, all the whole thing. But to me, I just felt like this is draining my soul. Like, I'm not supposed to be here. Like, I'm supposed to be doing something else. I don't know what it is, but it's not this. Like, this is not, I'm not the person to be here. And so, like I said, I'm not saying that's traumatic, because it's not, but there was some sort of uh, discomfort there that pushed me in another direction. It wasn't like, and like I said, these were great jobs. I mean, people stay at these companies that I worked at like for years, decades, and make a career out of it. But I just knew there was something there that, like, it was not, something told me I wasn't supposed to be there. And so, but I think you're right, though, because I mean, even if you break it down to like a micro scale, if you look at like a fitness plan or a gym routine or something, what you're doing is you're making very small, if you're building muscle, you're making very small micro tears to the muscle. You're causing micro trauma to the muscle, and the muscle is growing and getting bigger and stronger because of that. And so we can break this thing down just to the cellular level and say that your pain or your trauma can push you for growth or to other areas. And I think it's also true too, man, that you talk to people, and it's almost like that people will pursue a thing to escape or alleviate a pain more than they will to pursue a desire, if that makes sense. Like, it kind of sounds hard to comprehend, but you might talk to a person who, let's say they were born into poverty or whatever. Like, I feel like people will work harder to escape poverty than to gain money, if that makes sense. And I know it sounds like the same thing, but it's not the same thing. It's not. Maybe I should let you talk, because I'm kind of
Yeah.
taking the
No, this
stage
is
here.
perfect. And it totally makes sense, because, like, what you're saying, yes, it's funny because it's like the rags to riches story, where
Mm-hmm.
people will put someone on a pedestal because they've built something from nothing, right?
Yep.
And they're like, I can't do that. I can't do that. But remember, you didn't have that same level of pain of what they
Yep.
experience being in the nothing. And there
Mm-hmm.
are certain people that are in that sort of nothing environment, to the same person that went from rags to riches, that doesn't actually feel the pain. And you might be like, Carly, I don't believe that. But go out on the streets and talk to people. I've actually done it to make sure that I understand what's truly going on. And I remember someone living in a tent telling me that they've been on vacation for 2 years and that they might have to go back to normal life soon. They slept on a knife, like to protect him and his girlfriend because it was dangerous. And he called that a vacation. And it makes you think, like, I'm like, my idea of a vacation is very different than yours, right? But that
Right.
wasn't painful enough for that individual to go from rags to riches. They're in a comfort zone. They're actually comfortable there. The people that got incredibly wealthy had the pain. They don't want to go through that again. That was too painful for them. And so there is a component of, yes, they're seeking finances, but again, they're seeking finances to fill this void that if they don't, their whole life and their perception falls apart. And it's
Hmm.
really important as well when we think about trauma, right? It is perceived trauma. It genuinely is, because our perceptions all experience trauma differently than someone else. And you'll experience trauma differently than someone else. And the reason why is because we all have a different life purpose. We all have different priorities. And when we have our highest priorities, our life purpose impacted uniquely to us, we can perceive trauma. And this just is what it is. And so, like, for example, when you really understand it, like there's an individual that I got to connect with, and part of the perceived trauma was losing an expensive purse in
Mm.
a natural disaster they had just purchased. And someone would be like, why would someone pay you that much to overcome that? But if you look at what went behind it, it was the first thing that they had purchased for themselves after finally building their first business. And it took them decades to be able to afford it. And so what they lost wasn't just the bag and the fashion, it was all the meaning
Right.
behind it. And it was so hard on them to think, man, I just put decades of work into that and I lost all of that, including this one thing that I just got last week. And all their brain is thinking is, how am I ever going to rebuild this? Right. So all of a sudden we label this person maybe as vain and they shouldn't be stressed about it. But when you get into the crux of it, there's so much more going on. So I don't want anyone to judge themselves if they have what seems to be a small perceived trauma. When you open it up, it's like, understand why that actually is impacting you, and you'll understand a little bit more about yourself, because
Hmm.
those things and those components really genuinely impact on a day-to-day basis. And we can go through it in small, like mini micro traumas, to bigger traumas as well. So these small mini ones are again based on our values. Someone who has a really high value on health will really, really, really be impacted if their health is off even slightly. Whereas there's a whole world of individuals who doesn't have a value on health, and they might have 10 times more health issues and not even care. One person's not better than the other. It's just based on our priorities and our life purpose. So when we really know who we are, and this is the beautiful part, like knowing who we are is probably, in my perception, one of the most important things we can do on the planet. Because with that knowledge, we understand the world around us and why it's impacting us and how it's impacting us, which gives us a greater understanding of how to overcome it. And it also, it's kind of amazing because it's sometimes people are like, well, it's a selfish pursuit, da da da. Like, you should focus on this, you should focus on service. Every individual that I know that has given themselves the time to understand who they are and feel more purposeful and inspired daily wants to share that with others.
Hmm.
The greater level of service I have seen from people also directly coincides with the greatest level of inspiration they feel from within. Because we as human beings innately, it's like you said, like innately, yes, we do want fulfillment. Innately at the core of who we are, we actually want to embrace challenge and support. We want fulfillment. We only seek happiness and dopamine rushes and pleasure alone. And we only avoid pain when we can't see how it's actually served us, when we can't see how the pain has been a gift in our life and necessary for us to get where we are today. Once we see that, all of a sudden the happiness goes to, yes, I want fulfillment. And so it's cool because if you listen and you're like, wow, like I see that I don't want happiness here and I don't seek pleasure in this area of life, and I'm actually moving forward and I want the challenge, that's an area of life that you probably have some more perceptual balances in. But if there's certain areas of life where you're like, I can see that I just want the pleasure in this one and I'm trying to avoid the pain, that means that you have perceptual challenges, that when you overcome it, you don't have to be impacted. It can become something, again, that's fulfilling and inspiring and is on the way to your life mission and vision. I was just working with an individual last night, and it was interesting because there were all these perceptual challenges and an incredible amount of stress that was impacting his health as a result of some financial challenges that are going on in the business. And when we could see the purpose of why he was going through it, why others were going through it, he took way too much personal responsibility for how some people had acted, behaved, played with their money in a sense, even though he was trying to educate on the back end. When he could see the divine order of what was going on, I asked him, I said, well, what is there to be stressful about now? Right. And I'll keep asking that until we work through it. And I said, well, now that you know this, like, what is there to be stressful about? Is there anything remaining? And he's like, no. He's like, no. He's like, I actually see how this is serving him now, how it's serving his clients, present and future. He has so many strategies to overcome it. And we got to get a really beautiful insight on his life. Like, just by doing that work, he learned how much community means to him and the strength that his community has. And we learned what he's willing to do to actually help his community, even if things don't work out. I mean, this is like amazing to see. And I'm like, all right, go capitalize off that. They want to help you now. So it was quite fascinating to see this individual come forward and tell me, like, there's nothing good about this. I feel terrible. I'm ruining people's lives, to understanding the divine perfection of everything that's occurring and seeing not just the light on the other side of the tunnel, but getting in that tunnel now. So that as he moves forward, even though the challenge will persist for at least a few months, he's okay. He's okay. He gets to be himself. He gets to show up for the people he loves. He gets to connect with them, assist them, help them. And all the while, he's growing and evolving his own business, his own service. And he's learning how to empower people financially to a greater degree and create products and service to make sure people do that. And so, yeah, it's that label we put on it when we can't see how it serves us. And that's when we only want to seek the pleasure, not realizing that the pain, some of this pain that is going through and going on, are the very things that are getting you to the next step. Which is funny. I just sent out an email on this. It's talking about, like, we choose to disrupt our lives sometimes, but if we don't, it will get disrupted so that you can move forward into the arena you are destined to go, and you cannot prevent it. And the longer you try to step back and push it away and avoid it, the more pain is going to come forward to get you on track and on mission. You are destined to fulfill your purpose. You are destined to live in it. And the longer you try to avoid it and avoid the pain and the conflict and the challenge that comes along with it naturally, the more pain you'll actually experience and the more disjointed you'll feel, because you're so disconnected from what's truly inspiring to you. So part of it as well is, like, get really clear on what that looks like. And then, sometimes things are scary and it's like, all right, let's do it anyways. I'm going to get pushed into this eventually. Might as well start it now.
Yeah, you brought up a good point here, which is something that I say all the time. If you are like, it's easy to look at the self-improvement and the personal growth sort of space and label that as selfish. But if you're doing this the right way, man, everybody that's connected to you should benefit. That's your family, your friends, your partner, your children, if you have those, employees, if you have those. Everybody who is connected to you in any kind of way should benefit if you are improving yourself. This is why I always tell people, and sometimes I get a little bit of heat for this, but this is why I always say that, like, your personal development and your growth as an individual should be, like, I don't want to say priority is kind of a heavy way to say it, but it should be your focus on your life as far as, improving yourself, so that because you can't be, and this is the argument that always comes up, but, like, you can't be the best for your partner or your spouse or your family if you're not the best for yourself. Like, and as the argument that I use is, like, okay, well, if you really care about these people, like, you want to give them the best, right? You want to give them the best, whatever it is. So, like, why not give them the best part of yourself? I speak to on some other podcasts and to other guys. I talk a lot about men's issues, and like my thing about like you'll hear guys say a lot like, oh well, they'll give their life for their family, they'll die for their family or whatever, and like that's a noble thing. I get that. All men would probably do that, but my question is, why not live for them? Why not make a life that you could, the best life that you can make, the best person that you can be for them, give that to the people that surround you. So anyway, the personal growth thing, it's easy to look at it as a selfish thing because it's like, oh, you're doing you're listening to the podcast or you're doing the gym thing or you're trying to pursue a career or whatever it is. It's easy to look at all these things and it's to say it's a selfish thing, but if you're doing it the right way, everybody that's connected to you should benefit. But talking about this pain and this trauma thing, man, I don't know. I think that there's so many things that can come from your life that are positive. Let me see how I want to say this. I think some of the areas in my life that have been the most painful, that's when some of the most positive shifts have come, if that makes sense. And I was going to get your thoughts on this too, because I'm curious about this, because I'm sure people, and I'm sure you probably see this, I'm sure people have different reactions to something they would consider traumatic. I'm sure some people would feel something traumatic or painful and they want to get away from that immediately. They want to avoid it, not look at it, not talk about it. But then some people, I think like myself, I kind of do this. They almost like they step into it. If something if something happens to me that's traumatic or painful, it's almost like I step into that thing. And I don't know, I'm sure that's some sort of defense mechanism to have, not control's not the right word, but some sort of play in the situation, I guess, versus, some people, I mean, you see this in relationships like that, a lot of times one person wants to talk about the problem, the other person wants to avoid it, type thing, and I mean, I know that's like very different. We're not talking apples to apples here, but that's a very different, and that's also a spectrum too. People are different on that. But I was just going to get your thoughts on that. So like stepping away from trauma versus stepping into the trauma. Okay, I'll just give you a real quick example. The business that I have, like last year, we lost a pretty significant client. And it was for no reason other than a new leadership came in and wanted to make changes. I never met the people. Long story short, we lost the deal because a change wanted to be made. And the person who hired us originally, he was still in the same company. The company changed ownership and that kind of thing, but he was still there. And these people couldn't believe that this decision was being made. So I could have been pissed off and resentful. I could have blamed, whatever, pointed fingers. I didn't do that. Instead, I went out. I knocked on. I was telling this story yesterday, man, and maybe I'll tell this story on the podcast at some point. But I went out. I was knocking on doors. I got 50 business cards that was a maybe from people that I met, because a lot of the work that we do are like business to business. We work with a lot of businesses. The 50 business cards was just a maybe. I can't even tell you how many people I talked to that was a no. But during this whole process, I almost got attacked by two dogs. I was at this. I knocked on a person's door because I was trying to get in touch with an HOA representative for this neighborhood. Long story short, walked to the door. I heard two dogs barking. The barking stopped eventually, and they came from the side of the house. There were two cars in the driveway. They came from the side of the house, and I was like, okay. And so one looked like he was maybe a border collie. He was a little playful, but the other one, I don't know if it was a boxer or some sort of mix. He had like a very square face, is all I know how to explain it. And I don't know if you ever know this, but I don't know if you know this or not. I didn't know this. If you are ever in a situation where you feel like a dog is going to attack you, you're not supposed to turn your back. You're supposed to stay like face them and kind of back away or whatever. I didn't know that. So I turned around and it was like he wanted to jump on me. I said, oh shit, man. Anyway, that was a scary situation because I thought, but I almost got attacked by a dog for pursuing something that was to basically get out of this situation. So just to get your thoughts on that, man, because I know some people step into trauma, some people kind of shy away from it, and there's just different ways, I guess, to handle these traumatic things. So what do you see like in your expertise? Like, what's your opinion on that? I mean, is there a better way? I guess it kind of depends on the person, depends on the situation, but I don't know, just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. So if you're an individual that's kind of shying away from it and not wanting to connect with it or go back or look at it, there's no judgment. When before I had worked on my personal perceived trauma from my childhood, which is the sexual experience, which technically is rape, but I don't even like to call it rape because I've worked through it to such a degree that to me it was a sexual experience in a part of my life, right? It took me decades to remember that. And it was quite phenomenal that the moment I remembered it was the exact time I finally found something that would guarantee I could go from being traumatized by a rape to being like literally crying tears of gratitude for the experience and calling it now a sexual experience, right? Just a part of my life, something that I would never take away, something that I would never take it away. If you ask me if you want to go back and you could change it, never. I never want to change it. That was the perfect thing for me. I'm incredibly grateful for that individual. And I see exactly why it happened for me, exactly why it occurred, past, present, and future. Right. So I didn't allow that to come forward and I blocked it out until I had a solution. And so I see this often with a lot of people is like, if we don't think that we have a solution on how to overcome it, you don't even want to face it. If you've gone through trauma and you've gone to places and let's say it's more of a talk type therapy and you just have to sit there and talk about it over and over again, it's quite draining because you're
Hmm.
not getting to the other side, you're not clearing the trauma. And basically, it's like you just have to relive trauma over and over again, which is increasing your stress, increasing the pain around it. And I get it. I totally get it. I used to avoid all that too. I was like, what's the point? And so instead, I'm trying to fill my days with other things and ignore what's going on. I don't have to anymore only because I now like found the solutions. But again, this is part of the voids to priorities and the purpose component is I had so much pain around it that that was part of my destiny was to pursue how to overcome that. And of course I'm teaching it now. Like it's just, it is what it is. That's my destiny. This is where it goes. So when we think about facing trauma and facing it, it's like, well, yeah, don't beat yourself up. If you didn't have a solution for it, I get it. Like I get that you're not going to be able to work through it. And a lot of people, even listening to it, it's hard. I get too that it's hard to understand that that's a possibility on the other side. I cannot tell you how many times, even in the workshops that I lead, it's like I have people coming in. It's sometimes a hard sale. We're really just telling them, like, just come, give it a try, check it out. I promise you, like, if you do the work, we'll clear the trauma. I promise you. And then at the end of it, them being quite shocked because they didn't think they were going to be able to get to the other side of trauma, right? And it's not that this hasn't been prevalent, but remember, it's not present to the degree because it is a little bit harder. It asks us to face ourselves in a different way. It asks us to take accountability in a different way, responsibility in a different way. But what's amazing is even though those things seem hard in the moment, when you're done, you love it. People
Hmm.
absolutely love it. Like they feel so much better. It's like decades of and years of weight has dissipated off their shoulder, right? So when we think about facing trauma, I definitely wanted people to understand that there's nothing wrong with you if you're not doing it. You may just not have found that solution yet that makes you feel comfortable diving in. And I see this too even when I'm working with people. Sometimes they don't want to work on like traumatic things with me right away, and that's okay. They sometimes just come for business. But then when they see the results that they're getting with the perceptual shifts, they'll be like, can we work on this? Is that something you can do? And I'm like, why, yes, it is. So let's dive in. So part of it too is like building trust with people. And then once
Hmm.
I build that trust, it's like, okay, let's open up that door and clear some of the bigger things. And your example too is really interesting because I mean, I can already see that one client. This is beautiful, by the way. It's like the universe in action. When we rely on one person, it
Hmm.
can really, and they're our main bread and butter in a business, it can really stifle our growth.
For
And we
sure.
become over reliant and certain and put too many eggs in that basket, and it
Mhm.
actually disconnects us from building our business. So what's really cool is like the second they dropped you, what'd you do? You just got out there and you did the best you could as quick as possible to create as many clients as possible in an inspiring way. And it's quite, again, this is spectacular. So you had that in you all along, but why didn't you do it before? Because there was a
Mhm.
comfort level that was preventing you from taking that action. And no matter what you encountered, including the dog, and I'm sure some really angry people from time to time, you were like, I'm going to do this anyways. Why? Because now that that pain was there, you did what you were naturally and had innately inside you all along. So this is really cool because we hit our comfort levels, right? And then we get challenged by the universe to push us into that stage of growth that's actually required. And it's so fascinating. So I was working with an individual fairly recently, and their business had been slammed, like tens of millions of dollars impacted, and a lot of it was actually stolen by one of their employees that they had trusted the most, right?
Mm.
Who also slandered them publicly. And after I had talked to him, it had already been a year, he was finally rebuilding his reputation and finally starting to take action to build his company again, right? And so when we worked on it, we could see the perfection of why it occurred. Like, here's this individual who is trying to retire that doesn't want to retire. He thought he had to and was supposed to and should. And he was starting to follow suit with other individuals, but he was actually getting quite bored. And it's like the Nietzsche quote, like, when the why is big enough, right? We make the how happen, right? Can't remember what it is exactly, but I know we kind of talked
Yeah.
about it a little bit. Yeah, so we'll make that how happen. So his why is completely disconnected. He's disjointed when he's retired because his greater why was utilizing the company to help shift the dynamic of a third world country. And he was utilizing that company to help empower his employees to shift their lifestyle, shift their dynamic. When he disconnected from that, he did become depressed. He did become disjointed. He did feel disconnected with himself, bored, like getting dopamine hits off of, smoking and drinking because that was just how you fill your time. Like, he wasn't inspired. And then that theft and that loss of income and the crash of the business brought him back in and funny enough, gave him permission to do, before he was about to retire, exactly what he had planned on doing to expand the business. So
Mhm.
here, 2 years ago, he was like, I'm going to do XYZ, decided to retire, has this basically crazy storm come in, gets him to go back to his plan from 2 years ago to build a company in an inspiring way that'll expand it to a greater degree and fulfill that why and that vision of helping, like, build these people into, more than what they thought they could be as a result of the challenge. He almost gave
Mhm.
up on his vision, and then it's like, when you see it, it's like, well, what would you change? Is like, you don't want to change it anymore because you realize, like, man, that comfort, that giving up on those components because of what you think you're supposed to do. When I say connect with who you are, when you're so connected with that part of you, and like, I know, I can't imagine retiring. I can't. I just, it's, I can't imagine it. I work so much every day, but not because I have to, because I love it. Like, I genuinely love what I do. And if I'm not engaged in it, it's not that there's not other inspiring things. It's like, it's just so purposeful to me. It's hard for me to imagine life without it. Like, it fuels me, it energizes me, it doesn't burn me out. And when you find something like that and then you try to walk away from it, your life will react. So it's like, knowing yourself gives you also the opportunity to look at opportunities that come your way and say, this one's for me, this one's not for me. I could see that this will support me and I'll thrive here. I could see that this one's going to challenge me. Funny enough, I just got like a great opportunity in other people's perspectives. But when I looked at it, and one of my clients, we were having a real good laugh about it because he knows me really well. He's like, that sounds like a nightmare for you. And I was like, it is a nightmare for me. Whereas for other people, they would just be so delighted to do it. And I'm like, not in my life, because he knows me well enough to see, like, how much that would mess up in my life purpose and on my path, right? So we had a really good laugh about it. So one person's opportunity is another person's death. and one person's death is another person's opportunity. But when you know yourself well enough, you can actually look at things with a really broad perspective and be very clear on what to say no to and what to say yes to, which just helps you, again, create challenges that are inspiring. Because if I say yes to an opportunity that I know is just like death for my soul, guess what? That's the challenge that I'm taking on, that I have to
Mhm.
feel okay during it all. I have to feel okay as I disconnect from what's important to me. I have to feel okay as I walk away from things that I love. Or I could go to the other side and be like, well, I love all the things that I'm doing. And this side's not any easier work wise. But in this side, I get to fulfill things that are most purposeful to me. And all of the challenges that I go through, I genuinely want to do it. Okay, these are hard things too, just as hard as the other side. But these I'm inspired by. And I could just look at the two very quickly. And I very quickly can say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And when you really know yourself, you give yourself that opportunity to understand what direction to go. Again, instead of just having things just jam and push you to get back on track, right? It's
Yep.
the disruption by choice instead of by force in the sense.
Yeah. See, I think what we're talking about, man. So I think what you're talking about right here is the identity, and it's easy for us to okay. It's okay. It's easy to say about trauma. Like if something happens to you, it pushes you in a different direction. You know, one door closes so a bigger door can open. That kind of thing. I mean, it's easy to say all these things, and it's really it's like really easy after the fact to look back on something and say, okay, you know what, this happened for this reason. I'm glad this happened this way. Whatever. It's really difficult to see it while you're in the process, but like looking back in hindsight is you know, it's easier to look back at these things like that. But I think what we're talking about here, the identity, I really want to touch on this, man, because this is so important. Because you were talking earlier about identity, and now you're talking about knowing yourself. And it's like the reason I think that identity is so important, especially when you're facing trauma, especially when you're facing something painful, you have to know who you are and like how you think and how you feel. Because it's easy to say, like, it's easy to just say, this is who I am. I like these things. I don't like these things. These are my interests, whatever. But until something comes around to test exactly who you are and to test and to push you, like you don't really know who you are. This is one of the reasons that I tell, like, especially when I'm talking to men, this is one of the reasons that I say, like, these painful, traumatic things, this pain yes, it can push you, but it can also test you and show you exactly who you are. Because like how you react in these situations says a lot about an area you might need to work on, or something that's not going to work for you, or something needs to be improved, or whatever. It can be a good compass for you. But an important part about this is, if you don't know who you are, like if you don't know who you are or what your core beliefs are or what you stand for, when these things come along to test you, you don't know how you need to respond because you don't have anything to reference, because you don't know who you are. A real simple example of this is, and again, I'm not saying this is traumatic, but something comes like, okay, just I'll pick on myself right here. So lost this client who at the time was a pretty significant chunk of the revenue. If I didn't know how I would respond or what I needed to do in that situation, I mean, I don't know what I don't know what I would have done. It's hard for me to think about the what ifs, because I know what I should do and what I am going to do in that situation. And because it's like I already made my mind up before I even knew that was a possibility, that if like this is the thing I was pursuing, I was going to make this happen regardless of if this happened, this happened, this happened. And it's like you have to have that reference of the self identity. Like, who are you? Like, who, regardless of what's going on around you, who are you and who are you going to continue to be? You know, I mean, a real simple example that I think a lot of people, especially listening to this podcast, can understand is like fitness. You know, if you have a day where you don't feel like going to the gym or whatever, okay, well, are you the person that goes to the gym just when you feel like it, or are you the person that goes to the gym because you're consistent and you have a schedule that you keep with yourself? You know, and I talk a lot about it here, that the days that you don't want to do that are the most important days. Because if you do that over a long enough period of time, you look back and you say, oh, well, I didn't do these hard things just because I didn't feel like it. Or do you do the hard things regardless of how you feel, because that's what you know you're supposed to do? And then, you know, you do that over a long enough time period, you look back and you say, okay, well, I'm the person that makes things happen regardless of how I feel. And that's how these things happen, man. It's not like it's another thing I talk about too is a lot is like starting something new. You look at a staircase, like there's 100 steps on this thing and you're at step one and you're like, man, I'm never going to get to step 100. Like that's so far away. but it's like you take one step at a time. You don't take one giant leap to the 100th step. You take a step at a time, and the only way you can do that is over this time period. It's these decisions that you make regardless of how you feel, because you know you're supposed to do it. So you make these decisions over a long enough period of time, and that's how you get there. You climb one step at a time. You make one step at a time. You don't do these things like you don't just jump to the and there's so many different things, man. We could go with this. I want to keep it in the space that we're talking about, but you don't just jump into the 100th step. But yeah, the self identity, man, is critical, because we have to know who we are. And another thing too is, like, I think one of the one of the things this I want to be careful. I don't really talk a lot about politics on here or like anything like that, but I think one of the reasons we're having so much friction there in the political space, especially in America right now, is because people don't know, like, they don't know how to hear a thing that is not their idea and like listen to what this person say. Like, I think a lot of people think just because they hear someone else's opinion or, thought or whatever, that means that they have to take that, like they have to believe that for themselves. And it's like, no, man, you have your beliefs. This person has their beliefs. Why can't we all just coexist and just be peaceful together and just believe what we believe and just like make that work? It's not like you have to, if somebody says something to you, you don't agree with it. It's not like you have to like change their mind or like change your mind. Just let everybody exist, man. But anyway, the identity is critical, because we have to know who we are going to be and who we are before we even get to this experience. And so I just wanted to touch on that, man, because I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, perfect. I feel like it all kind of ties together in a way as well. Because even as you were saying, it's like the identity and the stair stepping, right? It actually goes hand in hand, and understanding who we are. Because when we think about stair stepping, right, you're right. Sometimes there's 100 steps, sometimes there's 1,000,000 steps.
Mm-hmm.
NASA has a 100-year plan, right? They have 100-year plans that they put together. Marvel, I know they're another company that has very intricate and inspiring plans on all the worlds they've created and how they're combined. And it's one of my favorite things to go to those movies with my brother, because he loves it and is so inspired by it. He
Mm-hmm.
tracks it. And so we'll be watching a movie and he'll be like, it's crazy, but they got this from this movie and this from that movie, and see how they're combining it all. And I'm like, yeah, that's amazing. And all I think on the back end is, wow, that company is so detailed and dedicated to stair stepping their vision. They don't
Mm-hmm.
need to have the end goal today, right? Same with NASA.
Yep.
They didn't need to have the end goal today. And even while people are alive and working on it, they may never see them reach their goals. That's not the point. It's the
Mm-hmm.
why. And so it's really cool, because when you find the why and you understand that, and that's part of your identity, the reason that you're here, your life purpose, you could have a goal that expands beyond your lifetime. And you don't need to have the pride of seeing it fulfilled. What you would love to do is ensure it becomes fulfilled, because it's part of the service you want to provide to the world. And that's when, they say it takes 25 years to be an overnight success,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like when you see someone being an overnight success, it's like, wow, how long did that take them on the back end? So careful when someone sells you a quick fix and that they did become an overnight success. I remember this one beautiful individual who was selling, I forget his name. He's awesome. I mean, he also helps a ton of people, by the way. There's both sides to everyone. But he was selling something where he's like, I made $50,000 in the first few hours of launching my course and learn how to do it. And I'm thinking to myself, you've been doing this for 30 years and you have 30 years of trusted fans and contacts.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and I did it in a week. And I was like, and of course you did it in a week. I mean, you're a centimillionaire. You've got a team to do it for you,
Yep.
but you're selling it to people who have never launched a product, don't have an audience, don't have a team. It's going to take them so much longer. So it's don't buy into the fantasy of being an overnight success, but realize that the journey to building, let's say that is something you're inspired by, building that platform, building that reach, and doing what it takes to get there is just as inspiring. It's more inspiring than being an overnight success, because you appreciate what you have at the end of the day more. You know that you earned it. There's a greater level of respect for yourself and what you're receiving. It's quite amazing. And so it's like, yeah, that identity and basically basically like building yourself and stair stepping really goes hand in hand. It's quite phenomenal. And when you find that thing that's so important to you, you're actually willing to invest in it long term. It's those short term hits and those dopamine rushes that aren't actually like a long term goal. And you'll see that those are not things that last for you to the greatest degree. The things that actually last are the things that you've invested in long term and put the time and energy in to create it and make it happen. And those are the things you appreciate the most. It's probably one of my favorite things sometimes to do with clients, because it's really inspiring to see like what they create and how. But we'll go through like short-term hits and when they got like quick money, quick jobs, quick clients, all this. And we'll go through and we'll see the challenges that came with that, because that's genuinely what we're usually infatuated with. We only see the positive. We only see one side. So we look at what the cost was, and then they realize, oh my gosh, all of those things that were the quick hits, they're not even in my life anymore. And then we go through the things that they've put time, energy, effort into, an investment. And those are the things that still make them thrive, that are still around today. And they become more appreciative for putting in that time. And then their vision expands beyond, I need this tomorrow. And when I get on a phone call with them, we're not now just planning for a quick hit of feeling good in that session. They're actually saying like, I'm really challenged right now, but I'm really grateful because it's going towards this goal and I see it and I see how this is working, but I want to get more clarity here. And now we're focusing on the long term of their life and they're enjoying the journey, which is really quite inspiring. And even like, I know I actually don't talk about politics either, and I don't get really into politics, but I do get into our emotions behind it. And something to pay attention to, which I've just had the I'm so grateful for my ability to travel. I've lived in 3 different countries so far. And what I keep experiencing, and I've married into a different culture as well, like a completely different culture. It's like my culture's anti-particle, and neither is good or bad, right? But what I keep getting to experience is the reality that when we live in our certain neighborhoods and we surround ourselves with people who agree with us, and these neighborhoods that we live in, these communities that we connect with, we don't even realize they agree with all our beliefs, right? But what I notice that is challenging about that is then we become so stuck on seeing the world in one way that it puts blinders on us, and we make judgments and assume that our way is right. One of the greatest gifts of living in these other countries, having like a cultural difference with my husband and his family, is it's really humbled me to see that my way is not the right way for the world. My way is one way for the world. And there are many other ways that are valuable. And the more that I expose myself to other cultures, other people, and actually understand why they do what they do, the human behavior behind it, right? I'm not a human, I say I'm a human behavior specialist because I love to learn this. So when I understand the human behavior of why they're doing what they're doing, what their priorities, their purposes as a culture, I start to realize how challenging I am to their mere existence. And my beliefs on what was right shifts to, is this right, or was this just right for me? And how can I actually see that these people are just like me, just in a different form with a different set of priorities? And it's funny because it's like, you go to space, right? And the astronauts say this, they see the Earth and they get the overview effect, which is they look down and they realize how connected we are and that we're all one. But what I'm pushing you guys to understand is you can get this perception and this dynamic and this understanding without going to space. When you see things and people for who they are, and you start to get through your own misperceptions, and you stop telling people how to live their life, what's right and what's wrong, and you realize that both sides are just actually trying to live a purposeful life, then what do you get? You get the overview effect. And what's funny too is like, the more that I do this, the more that I realize, like, I love that we have the balance of Democrat and Republican, because both sides are necessary. Too much on one side and we have a challenge, too much on the other side and we have a challenge, but they're there to hold each other accountable to try to bring balance. I don't want one or the other. Both really helps us and really makes our country like as inspiring as it has been. We're really lucky to live in the United States. We genuinely are. my dad says this, and I agree with him. He's like, you're born in America, you kind of already won the lottery a little bit. And I was like, totally. Like, we have a
Mm-hmm.
different set of challenges, but there's certain countries where me speaking to you in this way is not even acceptable. It's like not even
Mm-hmm.
allowed. And so, yeah, it's like, yeah, it's just, and yeah, I'm like so grateful. I'm so grateful. And yeah, sometimes you wonder, it's like, well, what did I do in previous lives to get here? But
Yeah.
thank you for doing the work, man. I don't know what you did, but I'm really
Yeah.
grateful to have the life that I have. And the more, again, that we have that gratitude is for these simple things, which we often forget how much we have, and we forget how much we have to be grateful for when we keep comparing our lives to something we think it should be, and we're trying to get stuck in that one way, like it needs to
Yep.
be this, it has to be that, and you keep trying to like force it into this tiny box, that you forget how magnificent your life truly is, and how I just get to like wake up every day and I get to go on a podcast and I get to speak as a woman, and that's not allowed everywhere. And I'm like, cool, that's my life purpose. So I'm really grateful that I get to do this right now, and the energy and effort that I got to put behind it. And I say it to people all the time, I love living here because it's one of the places that I found I can be the most entrepreneurial. That it's challenging. It's a challenging journey, but it's also very rewarding. And you live in countries that fulfill your values as well, fulfill your purpose. And this country definitely serves mine to the greatest degree so far. Which, by the
Yeah.
way, I know that there's probably other ones out there that'll do it. I just haven't found it yet, but don't worry, I'm exploring. I
Yeah,
have
man.
that open mind.
I think one
Uh,
of the best things a person can do, especially from America, is to experience other cultures and experience other mindsets and experience how, maybe not I understand you might not be able to go specifically to the country, but look, the best thing about social media is you can hear people talk, you can see people talk, you can go to YouTube, you can listen to podcasts, you can learn about other cultures. And I think that's one of the best things uh anybody in the world really, but especially America can do, because like you said, I think some of these things need to be put into perspective. Like, I think we need to say, okay, are we really going to waste time arguing about this? Like, because you go around the world, however many thousands of miles, and this is the issues that are happening over here. So are we really going to argue? Are we going to waste time like talking about this right now? And I don't know. I think seeing other cultures, seeing the how the society works there, how the culture works, how the people, these things are healthy. I think this is one of the best things that a person, because you're right. When we're in these neighborhoods, whether it's a neighborhood or maybe even a county, the majority of a county, a state, whatever it is, we're in these areas, and it's like there's a web of like this mindset. This is like connected, and we go outside of that, and then we experience different things. And I know some people have some people are not crazy about change, and some people are not crazy about their beliefs being challenged. And I would argue that if you are not comfortable with your beliefs being challenged, then maybe it's not something that you truly believe. But now that's just my opinion on that. Carly, listen, we're well over your promised break, so let's do this. Let's take a break really quick, because I promised you a break. Let's take a break, and then we'll be right back. I know one thing I wanted to ask you about when we talked originally. I think we were talking about like shifting your mindset changes. We were talking about authentic living, which I was kind of curious about. I know we touched on or I think we might have mentioned like core beliefs and limiting beliefs. I think there's a lot of talk about that, man, but what I don't think there's a lot of talk about is like the way we sabotage ourselves based on what it is that we believe. So in other words, like you'll see somebody who has they might have a really good thing going for them, but subconsciously, whether they're aware of it or not, they feel like, they're not capable or they're not worthy or whatever, whatever it is. And they'll try to like unconsciously self-sabotage. And I think I think that's a real thing, man. And so I don't know. I'm just curious. I guess maybe wherever you want to start, wherever you want to kind of go from here.
yeah. That's a really inspiring one, because like we don't actually sabotage in a sense because we think we're not capable, right?
Hmm.
Because every day we wake up and we do things that we think we weren't capable of doing, like in small little chunks to large chunks, right? But
Right.
when we don't do something because we're not capable, it's not actually because we don't think we're capable, it's because we have a fear around the outcome. right? So let's say you're wanting to get into speaking and you don't think you're capable of speaking. You're not scared to get up on that stage and try and fail. You're scared to do it in front of an audience that could judge you. You're scared to do it maybe because of a past perception. Maybe you don't want to fail in public. Maybe you don't want to be seen as that person who can't speak, who's like weak, who's something like that, who doesn't know what they're talking about. There's going to be, and these are just examples, but it's all going to be in your perception, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool because if there's anything that you're looking at, and I say cool because it's feedback, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mind is feedback. Pain is feedback. Fear is feedback. Anxiety is feedback. Depression is feedback. When I say it's cool, I'm like, it's cool because even if I'm feeling it in the moment and I have the emotion, I'm like, this is feedback. This
Right.
is genuine feedback that's going to help me get to the other side and get what I want. Right. So it's like whatever you're scared of and whatever you perceive you're sabotaging, look what's on the other side. Even if you don't think you're capable, what does that matter? There's plenty of things you do every day that you don't think you're capable of. It's not that you're not capable. It's what you perceive will happen because you're not capable, right? And sometimes, like I was even working with one individual who were still working on like building their business and stuff. They're scared of quitting their job, not because
Mm-hmm.
they don't, and there's part of them that's scared about their capacity to build an income that matches the income that they're getting. I see
Right.
that, but that's not the real fear. The real fear is if they can't do it fast enough, how will that impact their family? Which actually roots back to their experience of going through that in childhood with their parents and their perceived impact and perceived trauma around it. And that's the amazing part. That feedback of them perceiving they're sabotaging themselves actually is getting us to a core wound that's occurring. And so it's not really sabotage. You're just trying to avoid going through the same wound again. When you get grateful for that challenge, and this is through asking the questions to see how it served you, it's not actually saying that that person's going to go ahead and quit their job and start it. I actually
Mm-hmm.
don't know what they're meant to do. Their destiny is not up to me. It's not right for them to quit their job. It's not wrong for them to quit their job, right? Either way
Mm-hmm.
is perfect according to what they're destined to do. But the only reason the confusion is there is because that unresolved trauma is there. When we clear the trauma, they make the decision. They know which way to go. They feel clear and certain and poised and present. They're not judging themselves. They don't feel fear anymore. They just know which direction to go. And the plan that they have comes forward. It comes from within, right? It's always been there all along. It just comes up and comes forward because all that brain noise goes away. And another really important thing, like to know about sabotage as well, is we'll judge ourselves like for sabotaging our health and wellness and relationships and all these different components, when there's also a dynamic that there's certain things that you've sabotaged that if you
Mm-hmm.
look back, you still haven't invested time and energy in it. And why is that? Why is that? It's because it wasn't actually that high of a value to you in the first place. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? If you consistently sabotage, a lot of time I see this with health or potentially finances, there's nothing wrong with you. What you're demonstrating to me is it's just not as high of a priority as something else in your life. And while you're sabotaging this, I want you to see what your time and energy is going into building, because that's what's truly valuable to you. That's what's important. That's what you're not willing to sabotage for this thing that you once labeled as more important than what's genuinely
Yep.
purposeful for you. Yeah. And it's really quite amazing because it's again, when we take away these labels, these judgments, these misperceptions, you get to create your life around something that's truly important to you. And there's some mornings, right? I wake up and do personal development. There's some mornings that I wake up and clean. There's some mornings that I actually wake up and I'm like, what do I want to do? And I was like, I just want to work. And I sit on my computer. And I know according to the society, I'm not supposed to do this, right? I'm not supposed to do
Mm-hmm.
it. But I genuinely am like, what would I love to do right now? What would fulfill me the most? I'm like, I actually want to work. And so I'll get up at like 6 a.m. and I'll just be drinking my tea and like working on my computer. And I feel really fulfilled because I started the day the way I wanted to. And
Right.
someone else might be like, you're sabotaging self-care. And I'm like, dude, that is my self-care. Like
Yeah.
today, that is my self-care. That's what I love. And that's what's important. Some days it's studying. Some days it's listening to an audiobook. Some days it's going on a walk with my dog and like catching up with my friends on WhatsApp or something. I really pay attention to the things that are most inspiring to me. And I
Hmm.
really put my energy and focus there, because if I wake up every morning following these routines that people tell me are the best way to start my day for productivity, I will be less productive because I'll just be beating myself up for sabotaging, beating myself up for, not being productive, when in actuality, I am productive in my life purpose. And it's energizing me to such a great degree that I'm going to be more productive during the day because I've gotten all this energy from inspiration. Right?
Hmm.
Not from caffeine, not from stimulants. It's inspiration that fuels me. And so when
Right.
I say a life by design, I genuinely want people to feel what it feels like to have inspiration fuel you. It's addictive. I guarantee it. You don't want to give it up. Like you just
Hmm.
don't.
Yep.
And I love that, because it's like that means if you don't want to give it up, we've connected you with your why. We've connected you with your purpose, and you'll do whatever it takes to stay in that level of fulfillment and fulfill your destiny. And that's genuinely important to me. That's genuinely something it's so valuable, because I know if I never talk to you again and I've left you in that state, you're going to move forward no matter what happens.
Hmm.
You're going to live your life and be inspired no matter what occurs, right? And that's important to me. That's really, really important to me. And helping people to see how it can change how you feel every day, where you wake up and you go from I have to do this and feeling drained to I get to do this and feeling energized. And you go to bed and you're like, man, I had such a crappy day. It was so challenging, this or that. And you're like so frustrated and you have a hard time sleeping and there's insomnia and all these different components. You have to take stuff to help you relax. To, man, I had a lot of challenges today, but these are all the things that I've been trying to overcome. And I got some progress on some seems like I stepped back a little bit, but I got this. I know I can get to the other side. I have a game plan. These are things that are important to me. I know this is going to help me fulfill my life purpose. Guess what? It's going to be easier to sleep if you feel that way. It's going to be easier
Hmm.
to sleep if you think that way. You're not going to need to take the suppressants to help you calm down, because you're calming yourself down with your mind, with your perceptions, with how you see the world. So again, it's like, it's about seeing your world as purposeful, not good, not bad, but purposeful. And
Hmm.
it's funny too, because sometimes we get stuck in the, I need to see it good. Everything needs to be good. But remember, and this is a fun one, like when you meet someone, let's say you're dating, even if you're married, I know all of you guys can remember a time when you were dating and you met a man or a woman and you just thought they were the best thing to hit the face of the planet. A
Hmm.
few days later, a few weeks later, a few months later, you were like, what the heck is going on? How did I not see these red flags, right? Because the illusion has been crushed. That thing that you thought was so good, everything has both sides. So we don't want to live in that Disneyland world of everything's positive all the time, because what happens is we're not seeing the challenges that come with it, right? And that blinds us and doesn't get us prepared for what will and can occur. Whereas when we see something for both sides, I know individuals who have been in fulfilling partnerships, it's not because it was all positive. It's not because it was all
Hmm.
happy. It's because you guys were actually working together, not just to be happy, but to overcome your challenges together. And you liked their problems at the time, maybe not now, but at the time you're like, I have a choice. This person has this problems, and you can think about this. Sometimes we choose between two people. You have this person with this problem and this person with this problem, because we all have our own problems. No matter how much work you do, you're still going to have challenges. You're still going to
Right.
have your traumas, right? But you look at it and you're like, I'm actually more inspired to hang out with your problems than your problems. And
Hmm.
why? Because those are fulfilling for you to also overcome as well. And it's cool because those are the relationships that we love. We love the ones that we can be challenged with. We love the ones where we get in fights and that we overcome them and we figure out strategies on communication and how to get to the other side. We're so fulfilled by that. So yeah, it's like when we try to think that everything should be perfect, it's actually kind of boring. We get a
Hmm.
little bored in those scenarios where nothing happens because there's a lack of progress, of communication. And it's unrealistic to expect yourself to know and say everything and share everything that's meant to be shared all the time. You're going to be so busy in other areas of your life that it's funny. It's in the conflict that
Hmm.
important things come forward. It's genuinely in those areas. And it's not because you're defunct. It's not because something happened or something's wrong with you. It's actually just because you've been investing time elsewhere. You didn't think about this, and to bring it up as an issue or a challenge, and then all of a sudden you have a fight and you learn something about your partner and they learn something about you. And when you actually communicate to get to the other side, you feel fulfilled. You
Hmm.
feel fulfilled. You feel like a team, right? You
Yep.
never get that if everything's perfect. So seeing both sides prepares us for all the challenges that come our way. And it's quite inspiring. You can prepare yourself for far more than you think you can, which is pretty cool. And then also knowing, like, the more that you do that, the easier it is to ask yourself and re-ask yourself these quality questions to get to the other side when you're stuck in a big one, because I know that no matter
Yep.
what, we can't predict things, like everything. And then when you are stuck in a big one, you're like, I'm in the head of my clients sometimes. I know this. They're like, yeah, I was asking myself questions because I was thinking Carly's going to ask this and that and this and that. And this is what I got so far, but I'm still stuck here. And I'm like, great, thanks for doing some of the work beforehand. Because
Right.
it's predictable. Yeah, in those moments. And so by the time they come to me, we're just working on some of the remainders, which is great. They get more of an
Hmm.
efficient and effective shift as a result. So part of it, yeah, is doing the best we can with what we have, but then getting so fine detailed and refining it and understanding it that we can implement it when things explode, so that we can get through it easier, quicker, with more balance. Yeah, quicker, because
Yeah.
sometimes things are hard.
Yeah.
Things are going to hit you pretty hard. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to backtrack just for a second when you were talking about
Mhm.
starting your day and how it might not be up to how did you say it, society standards or whatever. I think that's a good point, man, because I think you have to be able to do what's consistent for you. It's easy to hear about how X% of millionaires wake up at 5 a.m. or whatever it is, but it's like, are you still there? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
I'm still here.
Okay,
Yeah, I
I
can
got
hear
a
you.
notification that said the Okay. I got a notification that said we were having a connection issue. We're having a little bit of good bit of rain here, so that might be what's going on. But no, I think you have to be able to do something that's like is however is consistent for you. Whatever consistency means for you, you have to be able to do the thing, in a consistent way. Because the guy that works, 16 hours a day is going to work almost half as much as the guy who works 4 hours every day. So I just wanted to touch on that before we got too far away from that, because I think you brought up a good point there that, like whatever works for you, however you can be consistent at it. I think the consistency is more important than trying to do something that's not going to fit into to your personality or whatever it is for you. Now, in saying that, you had to be aware of that life is super competitive and that there are people who will get up at 5 a.m. and you have to kind of, maybe that means you work. If you wake up at 8 a.m. instead of 5 a.m., maybe you work 3 hours later. I don't know however that has to work for you. But what I'm saying is you have to do it in a consistent way, because consistency is not gonna, if you don't have consistency, you're not gonna finish, achieve whatever the thing is. So I just wanted to say that before we got too far away from that.
Yeah, and that's inspiring as well, because again, this goes back to the identity, to understanding who you are and what's important to you, right? It's going to
Mm-hmm.
be unrealistic for me to wake up every day and compete with supermodels, right? Which I get to encounter living in Los Angeles. It's unrealistic for me to build my life around competing with them, right? I don't have the
Mm-hmm.
time, energy that I want to invest in that. But it is realistic for me to think, what are my competitors doing in personal development industry? What are they launching? What are they putting out there? Where are they innovating? And am I keeping up with that? Every day, that's something that I'd love to invest in. That's something that I'm learning more about. I love business as well. So it's like studying business, studying finances, studying how people work in a business and all these different dynamics, implementing it in my own, helping others implement it in theirs. That's where I put the most time and energy. That's realistic. And what's beautiful is when you're focused on something that's inspiring to you, competition doesn't become something that's diminishing. It doesn't become something that's frustrating. It just becomes something that you get to be aware of. It's almost like we get to see what's out there in the market and where people are doing pretty inspiring things and being like, that's really cool. Like, that's amazing. I love that they got that breakthrough. Sometimes when you're not like getting proud about it and you're like, I need to be number one, right? The pride's like, I have to be that person. I have to be recognized. Then I actually can go and be like, I actually want to study that. Like, this is amazing. I'm going to go study with my competition because this is really cool. And then I learn from it and I grow from it. And maybe I'm even collaborating with some individuals. And it's cool because it's like, give yourself permission again to find out what's important for you so that every day, don't waste your time investing your energy in competing in a life, an industry that you're not inspired to go through the challenges to actually move into the positions that inspire you. Because as I said, it takes like 25 years to be an overnight success. And if you think about dedicating 25 years to something and you're like, absolutely not, I wanted that to work out in a year or two. That's a fantasy. That's genuinely a fantasy. But if you think about it and you're like, yeah, Carly, like, I would actually love to do this for 25 years. And I think I'd love to do it for longer. So 25 years just seems like a normal part of the process. Then go for it. That's something that I know you're inspired by. And what's cool too is you're already doing it. You're already doing this in some way, shape, or form. There are already things that you are invested in. A lot of times when I talk to parents, sometimes it's like their kids and they're massively invested in their kids, you know, and sometimes it is, they're so invested in their kids. I have one mom, she's so invested in her kids. She's so inspired by her children. We've been coming up with business ideas that can allow her to spend more time with her children, not just to bring in money, but how she can include how she is as a mom every day and share that with other people who would be inspired to have the types of relationships that she's created with her kids, which are pretty cool. And I'm like, that's no mistake, girl. I was like, you have that because of what you've been doing on the back end, and people would find value in that, right? So it's like her giving herself permission to do that. It's like, I know, I'm like, would you do this for another 25 years? She's like, I'm doing it till the day I die. Great. Perfect. This is perfect. I know that you're not going to stop. Right. But if I ask her to go to a corporate job and sit in a cubicle all day long and do it for 16 hours a day and not talk to her kids, that's her death. That's her death. And I know that if she pushes herself to do that every day, she's going to fail. She's going to sabotage, and she's not going to be inspired. She'll be depressed. She'll hate her life. Right. So find out who you really are. And when I say create that life by design, I mean it. What do you love to do? Who out there also loves that and wants that service or wants that product? But because remember, wealth isn't a measure of how much money you make and how good you are at making money. Wealth is a measure of how much service you've provided and how many people that you've reached. And when you shift that, it's quite inspiring because then it's like, well, this is what I love. And I know that this demographic, this part of the world, this type of person also loves this and is inspired by this. And then the new question is not how do I make money? How do I reach them? And that's a business. The business shifts from when you shift from how do I make money to how do I reach the people who I'm inspired to serve, you're going to reach more people. You're going to come up with more strategies. You're going to come up with more solutions. And guess what? I guarantee your business will transform greatly. And it goes from being a financial thing, just financial, to being inspired to connect with people. And that's part of the journey of creating something around what you love. And the time frame that you put on that, it's like, well, why would I limit that? Why would I only give myself a year? Why would I only give myself 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? I love the idea of doing that in my own form. Why would I stop that? Find the thing that you can say that about. And guess what? I promise you, you won't need the motivation to do it every day. I promise you that when you're having a rough day, you'll show up anyways. I promise you that when things in life are potentially falling apart, you won't give up on these particular components. And you'll find within yourself the resilience that has always been there, but was dormant only because you weren't focused on the why to such a degree that the resilience wanted to come forward. You know, so it's what we're capable of and what we perceive we're capable of is there's such a gap. And yeah, again, if I just get people to live in that purpose, live in that why, like the gap starts to close. And the more that you close that gap and realize what you're capable of, the more that you start to ask yourself, what else can I do?
Yeah.
Whoa, this is inspiring.
So this, I was actually going to ask you about this next, but this might lead us into this, like this self-authentic living. Is that kind of what you're touching on here? I mean, maybe a little bit of it, maybe an
Yeah.
introduction to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the authentic living is genuinely, it's loving and appreciating yourself. There's a couple components for all of who you are, right? And creating that life by design, right? So the life by design is creating a life that is fulfilling and inspiring to you. You wake up saying, I love to do what I'm doing. I want to do it. I choose to do it. I desire to do it. The life of duty is when you wake up and you're like, I have to do this. I need to. I should. I'm supposed to, right? You're just
Hmm.
shitting all over yourself and what your life is supposed to look like, what you're supposed to look like, how you're supposed to be. And remember, every should that you have is according to someone else's perception that you've taken on. You've taken on someone else's belief of how you should show up, right? And it's quite interesting because when we look at that dynamic of creating an authentic life, part of it is being yourself, realizing as well that being yourself, you're not only going to get supported, but you're going to get challenged. One thing you said, which I know all speakers experience and all humans experience, is that there was a moment where you said, I'm going to say this, even though sometimes I get a little backlash for saying it, right? I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times, sometimes I'll say things, I'll be like, oh, I'm going to get backlash for that one. Oh, I'm going to get backlash for that one, right? But I also know that to the degree that I'm going to get backlash for certain things that I've said, which some of them probably have already dropped off listening by now and have sent me an email. Uh, I'm also going to get a lot of thank yous, right?
Hmm.
And so it's the unrealistic expectation to be the hero. I am going to be both the hero and the villain in someone's life. I'll be the hero to individuals that perceive and integrate this information in a way that it supports their own life purpose and it helps them get to the other side. They get aha moments, inspired, and they're inspired by our conversation, right? I'll be the hero to them. You'll be the hero to them. But I'll be the villain to someone who perceives that what I'm saying is challenging to their life experience, that this is going to impact their life experience. And I've challenged their values, their priorities, their purpose. Okay. That's who I'm the villain for. If I have unrealistic expectations to only be both sides, and I only love myself for being good, supportive, and other people's perspectives, I'll never get there. I can't, because there's 8 billion people on the planet. To try to make everyone happy and be a good person for everyone is impossible. There's too many variations. There's too many different perceptions. I just can't match it all. No one person
Hmm.
can. And so part of it as well is seeing how it serves basically to challenge individuals, how it serves to be yourself and cause some stress in other people's lives, which it will. It's going to cause stress not only in the public eye, but also in the private eye. You know, you might be the person who works 16, 18 hours a day, right? My dad was. He was in the film industry. He would work 18 hours a day sometimes. And it was interesting. Like some people, I actually didn't have, it's funny. When I grew up, I was like, I don't actually have to work on that. I didn't have a perceived charge on it or trigger. I was like, I didn't ever think my dad was like abandoning me or focusing on work. I just saw him doing what he loved, right? That was my
Hmm.
perception. But I've worked with a lot of people who had busy dads or busy moms that are like, my mom or dad abandoned me, and that's their perception, and we have to go through and work and see how it actually serves them, right? So remember, like my perception is that supported me, and other people's perception was that sucks, that shouldn't have happened. And so if I'm trying to make, if my dad is sitting there trying to make all of us happy and not doing what he loves, I don't get the life that I had. I don't get the
Hmm.
inspired dad building an inspired business, showing me what it takes to be an entrepreneur, showing me not just the pleasures, but the immense pains that he's gone through and how to get to the other side. I don't get to see my mom and how she shows up as the wife and the partner in the relationship and what she's building in her own form that coincides and not only supports my dad, but supports her vision and her purpose, right? And so it's important to remember that you're going to challenge someone no matter what based on their perceptions. You
Hmm.
cannot control this. Part of living authentically is seeing how it serves someone enough to a degree that you don't try to hold that part of you back. right? Because
Mhm.
there are times, most of the time in consultations, I can be very calm. I am very calm most of the time. 99.9% of the time in a consultation, I'm quite calm because everyone who shows up, they've paid to be there. They want to get to the other side. I remember 2 times I've yelled at a client. I've been doing this for 11 years, 2 times. They were grateful after, but it was just, they were so stuck and they were pushing like me so hard and they wouldn't do it. I had to yell at them because the level of self-righteousness is really high. And I yelled at them. And then in that moment, they're like, thank you. I needed that, right? They're like, I really needed that. I've been really stuck. And they're like, okay, I'm ready. Let's answer the questions. Let's get to the other side. So if I don't give myself permission to show up as the villain in moments that it's necessary and love and appreciate myself for doing that, I won't do what it takes to help people get to the other side. It's an integral part of my business. It's very, very integral. And so knowing that in yourself as well will give you permission to be authentic, knowing that you not only are meant to be the hero, but you're also meant to be the villain and you're still worthy of love. When I give people certainty of that, because sometimes we have so much guilt and shame. So when I help people clear guilt and shame, it's not to make them a better person. It's not to puff up pride. It's just to get you grateful and see the purpose behind what's occurring. When you get to that gratitude, you calm down and you stop trying to repress all of who you are. Every part of you is necessary to fulfill your destiny. You don't need to get rid of any part of yourself. Each part is a beautiful tool. And part of what I love about doing this work that I do is when we shift the perception on a tool that you have within you, which is usually a behavioral trait that you're judging, guess what we get to do? We use it more wisely. We use it more wisely, use it more freely, openly, without having to sit there and stifle ourselves. And the other really cool thing about this is if something is showing up in your life, a behavioral trait to an extremity, like an extreme degree, it's because you're judging it. This is actually why you're meant to love all parts of yourself. And the more you resist being this type of individual, the more that it actually comes out of you and the more it comes out in an extreme way. And when I first started seeing this happen in my clients, when we started to shift their perceptions around it, remove their judgments, help them love and appreciate themselves so they could be that part of themselves authentically, see the purpose behind it, all of a sudden that behavioral trait balanced out and transforms and the extremes start to dissipate. And then the only time the extreme comes up is when it's necessary. And when I say when it's necessary, I'm saying if you're about to be kidnapped, I want you to be the most vicious villain on the face of the planet. Like,
Mhm.
pull that out,
Right.
If someone on the back end is stealing tens of millions of dollars from your company, time to get vicious, time to be a little bit of a villain, time to stop being so nice, right? And so it's not meant to be gone, but loving and appreciating it actually transforms it, balances it, and empowers it. And that empowers you. Again, using all parts of yourself, not just one. So when we think about authenticity isn't just like, I have to be this way or that way. It's actually allowing yourself to be everything and loving and appreciating yourself for that.
Yep. I love that, man. I think, and I don't have I have nearly, not nearly the experience that you have working with people with this, but I think one thing that I see when a person has an issue with the the self authenticity, you see this a lot with people pleasing, is I think that these people think what they're doing is, building friends by being friendly or being, whatever with people. But the problem with that is, man, that, if you're the type of person that you like, in your words, if you're the villain, or if you say what you have to say or how you feel, people will actually trust you more than they will than whether you're just, if you're just trying to be a yes man or just agree with them or whatever, because you can't trust a person like that. You can't trust a person who just agrees with every single thing that you say. I mean, if you're a narcissist, or if there's a narcissistic person, maybe they'll like that. Maybe that's kind of what they, manipulate people to do. But the normal person is not going to be okay with just, agreeing with everything. So, but then also too, like the people that I talk to that are kind of in this space, it's like at a certain point, man, that builds up. There's only so much of that you can take about, not saying what's on your mind, not speaking, not voicing your opinions, not having your opinions heard, because that you've done this for so long that it's like now you feel like, your voice isn't being heard. And no, I don't care who you are, you can only take so much of that. Like, people have to be heard. Their opinion has to be heard. Like, they have to be, they have things they have to say. And so I think it just has, as far as the people pleasing thing goes, I think that has an opposite effect. I think there's the effect that a lot of people think it has is opposite. And you mentioned something about the ability to be the villain. This is incredible, man, because one thing that I have learned from like training martial arts and being around people who are very high level martial artists is it's like there's this ability to be dangerous, but like the conscious decision to not use it, and you'll hear a lot of people who train martial arts, they'll say, like people who have been doing this for years, they'll say like the skill of martial arts, just knowing how to use it will probably be one of the things that guarantees you'll never have to use it, because first of all, you have the self-confidence as if you're in a confrontation, you can kind of talk it down or whatever. But it's also too, there's a humility thing to it, man. Like you see these, when you're kind of sparring with somebody, or you're in a drill with somebody, it's a very noble characteristic of a skilled martial artist for them to have an opening on you and not take it. Especially if you're a new guy, you're just kind of learning some things. Like it's like a metric of their skill to be able to not follow through with that when they clearly have the opportunity. And so I think that's 100% true. I think what you're talking about, this ability to be the villain, but but having the conscious choice not to, unless you have to, and hopefully that will never happen. But it's like I think that's something that everybody should be able to do. And this kind of takes us back to the earlier point we were talking about the trauma and the pain and that kind of thing. It's when you go through that, man, yeah, that's like an internal scar, but it's like now you made it through that. Like everybody that is listening to this or that will listen to this, they have made it through, you have made it through, I have made it through 100% of your bad days. Like there were the days that you thought you could not go through, whatever that was for you, whatever your most traumatic thing was in life, there was that day that you felt like you could no longer go through. And if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, if you're seeing this, you have made it through all of your bad days. And it's those kind of things that like teach you like what you're truly capable of. I'm not saying anybody should go out and voluntarily take on, something traumatic or stressful or life changing, but I'm saying that when these things happen, like when you build this sort of, I guess, internal resilience, basically this ability to, be this villain, to stand up in the face of this and say, hey, I haven't been maybe in this situation, but I've been in a similar situation to this, and this is how I reacted. I was able to get through it from there, and now I know I can do it now. And that's one of the reasons, like, especially I think women should practice martial arts just for the obvious reasons, to be able to protect themselves. But I think men, I really push this a lot for men because, as men, and like I said earlier, I talked to men about men's issues and things like that. But it's like as men, pride can be a very I guess there's some areas where it's good. Pride is good sometimes, but a lot of times pride can get in the way of men, especially their personal growth and their own life. And something like martial arts or something like that will really humble you, and it teaches you how to take a loss. It teaches you how to be humble and take a loss and and interact with this thing. And you meet a guy who's more skilled than you. You go do this thing. At the end of it, you shake hands. You learn something, and then you go on about your life. And I think that the ability to be humbled and have that humility and have that experience I think that's one of the most important things we could ever learn in our life. I mean, the skill is a byproduct. The skill of being able to protect yourself, that's one thing. But then having that experience, learning from that experience, and being able to be humbled, because like these days, man, a lot of people have issues with the humility thing. We especially on social media, we're on social media and somebody says something, makes a comment or whatever, and we just like internalize that, and it just changes our whole day. And we think that's about, this comment means exactly what it says it is. And that's how I am. And the world just sucks and everybody sucks. And it's just like this, it's just whole snowball effect, man. And there's just like, if we could just relax and take a step back and just like, let's be humbled about it. First of all, the person that's making the comment has something going on in their life that the comment has nothing to do with you. I mean, they have something else going on in their life. They're projecting that onto you. And anyways, it's just this, the ability to have that sort of villain, the where you can call on it if you need it. I think you mentioned even the word the hero. And I'm a big believer in being the own hero in your own story. Whatever that hero is for you, just be the hero in your own story of life. And I mean, even that is a profound thing, you know.
Yeah. And this is quite inspiring as well, because it's like when we think about that dynamic of pride, right? And women have just as much pride, by the way. We have just as much pride as men. And we just have it in our own form. And it's just pride is basically whenever we get puffed up about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a great reflection, because I know that when I say this, everyone's going to start to realize where they are proud. We are proud when we perceive that we are better than another person. That's us being proud. We've put someone else in a pit and we've made them bad and wrong for basically their priorities and their purpose and how they display and demonstrate it in their own form. Because if they're angry and aggressive with you, are challenging it. You
Mm-hmm.
can also see when you are supporting it, they stop being angry and aggressive with you. So we get proud and puffed up whenever we put someone in a pedestal pit, and then we put ourselves on a pedestal, right? So that means we have more benefits than drawbacks, more positives than negatives to our behavior. We're not seeing both sides, right? We're not seeing both sides. When I told you that I met the homeless individuals and I was interviewing them, right? I was talking to them because I wanted to find out some truth about
Mm-hmm.
what was going on. I had just had a friend who she was puffed up about how she had gone out and brought food to homeless. And I understand that was of service. And she was a bit puffed up about it. And she's like, I feel so good about myself now. And I was like, you know what? I want to try this. And I thought, well, what would I want if I was homeless? And I was like, I'd want a sleeping bag. 100%. I don't want a burrito. I want a fucking sleeping bag. Pardon my
Mm-hmm.
French. It's cold. And so I was like, okay. So I started to raise money to bring sleeping bags to one specific neighborhood. And what was amazing is that's when I learned that people were on break, they're on vacation. And there was a small percentage of them that were actually really struggling and had mental issues and couldn't function in society. They were there, but it was a smaller percentage that I thought. And what I realized in that moment is that what I did was nothing to be proud of. Did I
Mm-hmm.
help some people? Yes. But I also supported some people in staying disempowered and not pushing themselves to get out of their current circumstances. I just made them more comfortable. People who are fully capable, incredibly intelligent. I was talking to some people and I was like, I can't believe you're here, right? Like it was amazing to me. And so both sides came along. When I say that when we say humbling ourselves, right, of that pride, it's just to see that everything that you do has both sides. Every bit of information I share with you will have benefits, but it's also going to have drawbacks. And when I can see that, I don't get puffed up about what I'm doing. And what that allows you to do is to be present, to be authentic, to be grateful, right? And so we all have these moments where we can have pride. I do love as well fitness, by the way. And when I choose, and not just fitness in general, I love to choose teachers that humble me for all that's required for me to learn. One of my favorite yoga teachers makes me feel like a beginner every class, and I do feel like a beginner. I remember the day I was in one of his workshops and he had me do an example for a handstand, right? And I'm trying to do it. And he slaps my back and he goes, I can't believe it. You are an advanced student. And he's starting to like talk to me about my thoracic spine and what's wrong. And I just remember sitting there being like, you think I'm advanced? I was like, what? I was like, I've been with you for like a decade and I don't feel advanced. And that was the moment that I realized I had chosen this person because they humble me on my journey to not get puffed up about my yoga practice, to not get puffed up about my physicality. He reminds me in every class that I've learned so much, but there's so much more to learn. And when we can ask ourselves those questions outside of these dynamics where we have someone else like basically proposing it to us or giving it to us, it humbles us on a daily basis. Everything that I've talked about today comes from a certain level of education and expertise and also involvement of actual experience of what I've been doing and assistant individuals. But in 10 years, there are there are so many things that I'm going to learn. There's so much of this that's going to grow. There's so much certainty that I'm going to have. And some things are even going to change. And that's okay. Like, that's part of the beauty of it. Being humble enough to know that what you know now is valuable, but humble enough to also know that you have so much to learn. Life is so big and there's so much out there. I can't imagine knowing it all. Like, I just can't even imagine. And then if I did, and I was the smartest person on the planet, it's like, then what? Like, how boring. I wouldn't be able to talk to anyone. I wouldn't be able to communicate with anyone. Like, everyone would bore me. And I was like, that sounds so boring. No, not my life purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to learn. I want to be a forever learner, a forever grower. And then I want to share those different stages with people as my information evolves, to help them as their information evolves, as their life evolves. And it's cool because it's like, when you think about the people you want to connect with and the ones you want to hang out with, you don't want to hang out with the person who's like, I'm amazing, I'm this, I'm that, I'm better at this,
Right.
I'm better than this person and better than that person. You want to be as far away from that person as possible, because
Mm-hmm.
you're like, you're exhausting, right? So when you try to have that puffed up sense of pride and you're trying to be that individual, you're going to get humbled. You're going to get
Mm-hmm.
criticized. People are going to come in, and the universe actually draws individuals in to criticize you, to bring you back down to equilibrium, to balance your perceptions and realize that you don't need to be that. That's a false sense of security. Where it's interesting because it's like, when we ask those questions to shift and to take away that pride, the only thing I'm taking away from you is a false sense of security. And when I replace it with a security from certainty in who you are, you don't ever need the false sense again. You become more stable with who you are. You become more balanced, certainty, right? And that false need on the outside dissipates because you're authentic and you love and appreciate yourself for who you are, no matter what you've done or you haven't done, right? It's quite fascinating. And a cool thing to catch with pride as well is we will puff ourselves up when we're feeling down. Okay. So this is cool. You can't have one without the other. If you're really puffed up and you're having a really hard time, that means I also know that you're really also having, really putting yourself up. I know that you're also really having a hard time in an area of life. And sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
might show up in business and be really puffed up. And then I'll look at your relationships and I'm like, you're really struggling there. So you're trying to feel greater because you're feeling lesser here. And it's interesting because it also goes hand in hand for those of you who are like, well, Carly, I don't feel like I have much pride. I feel like I have a harder time. You can't have one without the other, because they're actually there to try to balance you and bring you back to equilibrium. I just like to ask questions to make it more specific so we can have it happen faster. There's actually like a mathematical equation behind this, and it's a science, and it's really cool with our perceptions, so that we can just balance it without having to just have the universe and try to figure out all the cues. It can be easier. But when you are having an incredible amount of shame, that's also balanced with somewhere in your life, you're puffed up. You've got yourself on a pedestal, right? And it's cool because when you see both sides, you just sort of like, it's like an aha moment that's like, huh, okay, it's not as bad as I thought. You know? Yeah. All right, I got this. And it helps you to shift the dynamic of how you feel every day when you see that nothing's missing in your life. It really is something you become grateful for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very well said, man. You said something about the continuing, I can't remember exactly how you worded it. You said basically continuing, the need to continue to grow and learn. And I was just talking to a guy about this. I think that mindset is something that, if you have the mindset that says you will always continue to you'll need to continue to grow or improve or whatever, I think that's something that will guarantee that you do. Because if you have the mindset that says, look, I will, no matter what I do, what I achieve, where I get in life, I will always have to improve and grow. And I think that's just something that perpetuates the growth, because if I think you're right with this pride and this humility thing, if a person, I mean, I know that you, in your line of work, you probably see this. I don't know how many times you probably see this. A person, you'll be working with a person and they say, I'm good. I don't need to improve, whatever. I mean, I can't imagine how frustrating that is to try to help a person who can't see improvement. Anyway, whatever. So that's just that just kind of ensures that the person does, like, the mindset that says I need to improve constantly, always, I
Mm.
think is something that will ensure that you do. Um, And I do think there's lot to learn, man. And I appreciate like what you've shared here today, and the just the mentality, the philosophy, the thought process. There's a lot of stuff here that that I think is going to open somebody's eyes somewhere. I hope the right person hears this. Um, I do want to make sure, because I know we got to finish up here in a couple minutes. I want to make sure you have enough. We have enough time for this. So where can you be found? Where are you on social media, websites,
Mhm.
or what's going on there?
Yeah, so the best place is just start with my website, carlypepin.com, and that will take you everywhere. So any social media platform that you love the most. And then on top of that, if you wanted to connect one on one, there's also that option there. So that's the best option.
Okay. Um, I do have one last thing to ask you, something I kind of ask everybody, just goes along with the theme. If you had to pinpoint one of the most important lessons you've ever learned, it can be in business, if it's something from your personal life that you're comfortable sharing, it could be something that you've learned from someone else, just one of the most important lessons you've ever learned. What do you think that would be? Something you're comfortable sharing?
How phenomenal it is on how much is actually perceptual, and it's interesting because uh, I'm a human being, right? There are going to be times, and I go through times where I feel so disconnected from my purpose. And in front of me, I have whiteboards galore, and it's filled with my vision and my mission. And I see the breakdown of what I would love to achieve. When I'm disconnected with myself because of judgments, misperceptions, comparing myself to the outside world, trying to be someone I'm not, I look at that board and I feel like I'm missing something. Then the second that I clear it, and this happens every time, it's amazing. I look at that board and I'm like, right on track. What was I thinking? I was so stuck in my perceptions. And the more that I do it, the more that now when I look at that board, right, and I feel disconnected, I'm like, it's just a perception. Let's figure out which one it is and clear it. I'm like, I'm going to stay on track. I'm going to stay focused. So it's amazing how powerful it is to shift our perceptions. We only have control of our perceptions, decisions, and actions. And when I can shift my own and others' perceptions, the actions and decisions you take after naturally align with your life purpose. And that's something that is beyond my control for someone else, but something that I know that they can control in their own life when they shift their perceptions and then consciously, unconsciously pursue something that's more valuable and meaningful to them. So, yeah, it's
That
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible. I think because if you really want to break it down, everything like whatever the meaning is that you give to a thing is the meaning
Mhm.
of the thing. I mean,
Yeah.
we like I had a conversation with somebody one time. It's like it's crazy how like words just mean things. You know what I mean? Like we all somebody somewhere at some point decided that a certain word meant a combination of other words, and it's just like these are the things that these things mean. And if you like what I'm hearing when you say this is you change your perception of that, you change the way these things, like what these things mean to you, these things happen to you. You I was just talking about this yesterday. You have the ability to, I don't know if you've ever read the book Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
it's
good.
okay.
I love that
Yeah, so
one.
it's like
Yeah.
assigning the meaning to this thing.
Uh,
This is just what I hear, and maybe this isn't your complete your philosophy on this, but this is what I hear when you say this. This is kind of what comes to mind, is just changing the meaning that we give to these things. You know,
Yeah, and that book's a great example because I mean, part of it I can't get into too many details, there's so much to explain. But part of what he's going through perceptually when he starts to think about his wife when he's going through really challenging things is actually a part of our brain and a natural part of the memory anti-memory when we're going through traumatic situations. It's very cool. That is a very strategic part of your brain that's actually helping you to manage trauma, which I go over in workshops and stuff. It's really cool. The other component is he found meaning by helping others. So
mm-hmm.
here's this guy going through trauma, and now he's starting to be of service and do talks and help other people get through their rough situation in this camp. And it's like, the man created meaning for himself,
Right.
and so of course, like, he's not just waking up every day doing this duty and this painful experience. He's waking up every day thinking, I get to also be of service to these people, I get to help them to get to the other side. And the more that he helps someone else, the more that he helps himself. Right? It's such an inspiring book. If you haven't read it, it's really,
For
really, really
sure.
inspiring. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
really
And
cool.
it's also too, you talk about perception and perspective, man. If this person can do that in a concentration camp where, you know, death was almost guaranteed. I mean, you almost have to ask yourself, okay, like what's my excuse? You know, because
Yeah,
I have never been through anything like a concentration camp, and like if this guy can make it work right here, then you almost have no excuse for yourself. I mean, you know,
for
like
sure.
like
And
these things that I can talk about or whatever
yeah,
is nothing like the level of a concentration camp. I mean, you know,
yeah. A reminder for people as well, because we think death is not guaranteed. Like, it is guaranteed.
hmm
And I don't know what's going to happen or when. For all I know, a comet could come at me right now and annihilate me that was hiding behind the sun. Right? I
hmm
can't remember. I was reading something recently and they're like, so many comets hide behind the sun that we can't even see. And I'm like, oh my gosh, would we even know fast enough that we were going to get annihilated? I don't even know. I don't know the science behind it. And I was like, so much could happen. I live in California by the San Andreas Fault. I could get caught in a crazy earthquake. Life is not guaranteed. You know, death is guaranteed. When
hmm
you were born, your life was guaranteed. The quantity of time you have to live it is not guaranteed. What you do with it is up to you. We don't know when we're going to die. We know when we're born. We know when we came in. We don't know when we're going to die. We don't know what we're going to face. Make the best of what you have so that if you look back at your life and say, do I regret anything? Do I regret not living, not pursuing what I want? You can say no. That's a great gift to give yourself. And it's a great example and a great way to inspire others around you. You know, it's a great way to help others also as well do that for themselves. So yeah, Viktor Frankl got a great firsthand experience of how close death was. And that it drives you to just be like, I'm gonna do it anyways, man. But remember, we
hmm
actually all have that and we act like immortals in a mortal body, right? And then all of a sudden we face our mortality and we're like, I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have done this. Do it now. Today's the day. Now's the time. You don't have to wait. It's not any emotion, any fear, anything you have around it is not worth holding on to. It's just not.
Listen, that is a perfect outro. I do not want to alter that in any way, shape, or form. um, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate your time here. Appreciate your insight. Appreciate everything you shared. And it's been a great conversation. So just hang out for just a second. I'll explain to you about the upload situation right here. But I definitely appreciate it. It's been a really good conversation.
Yeah, thank you. This is an inspiring collaboration for me as well.
Thank you. Hey guys, I appreciate everybody tuning in today. If you enjoyed this podcast or enjoyed this episode, you can find more at Pure Wisdom Podcast. This is on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Rumble, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple and Google Podcasts. There you can subscribe, like, and share and interact with all of our content. Again, we appreciate it, and we will see you next time.